Good morning. Welcome to day 2 of IT Forum in Barcelona. You've landed in Management 322. This is an overview of System Center Configuration Manager. My name's Brian Cower. I work in the product group for Configuration Manager as a group program manager. It's my little sidekick here.
Good morning, guys. My name is Jeff Wetlaufer. I'm the technical product manager sitting over in the marketing side of the group. And we want to appreciate your time here and thank you for coming today. So this is an overview session designed to highlight for you the product itself as an overview. And where we can, we're going to inject in here where you can go this week for deeper drill downs into some of the meat and the details of the product. So we've got some great highlights for you today, and I think we should just get right into it.
So the objectives for today are kind of talk about what's in the release of Configuration Manager 2007, talk about the 3 pillars: comprehensive deployment and update, enhanced insight and control, and optimization for Windows and beyond. Do some feature overviews, get into some demos, and then, as Jeff was just saying, point you to some of the other sessions this week, later today and later throughout the week, that will go into much greater detail. So this is one of the biggest beta-tested products we've had on Configuration Manager, or SMS. We were deployed at over 400,000 beta seats throughout the world. 20 TAP customers, technology assistance partners, and RDP customers, which is worldwide. There was over 20,000 downloads of Beta 2 and the release candidate, and 12,000 RTM evaluations. In the spring, we're coming out with SP1. Some people might ask, wow, you had some bugs, you need to get those fixed. That's not really what the release is about. Our SP1 has very few bug fixes. It's mostly about picking up support for Windows Vista SP1 and Windows Server 2008. We're also going to add some functionality in there around out-of-band management and Intel's AMT technology. Dave Randall's doing a session later this week on that. We're also adding, if any of you remember, in SMS 2003 SP3, we had added our asset metrics acquisition into it, so you could actually do asset inventory. We're improving some of the features there with Asset Intelligence 1.5. We'll be able to sync to the cloud, get new information from the cloud on what new applications are out there, and you can also submit unknowns to the cloud and get that feedback. Following that, in the summer of 2008, we'll have Configuration Manager Release 2, which, if you're a software assurance customer, will allow you to get more functionality. The big investment there is around SoftGrid, or Microsoft Application Virtualization. We're also integrating client health reporting into the product. And we're adding some server provisioning scenarios, specifically multicast. So if you want to build 50 servers at once, we have multicast support, so you can advertise that task sequence down to all 50 at once. We're allowing you to report on security as well as configuration at the same time with our integration with Forefront, and we're adding in SQL reporting services so you can slowly migrate your reports over to SRS. One of the pillars I was talking about before was enhanced insight and control. We made some major investments in Configuration Manager 2007 to improve this, one of them being the Administrative Console, which leverages MMC3.0 and is managed code now. It's very extensible. It's got improved visuals and better navigation. It also improved setup. Wally will be talking to that later today. He can show you more of that, like our prereq checker functionality. We have some new UI and drag and drop features. But let me go ahead and just jump right in here and show you a quick demo. So here's the console, and on the left here, we've organized this into different tasks that you'll typically do. We've separated out site management, so everything you do to get the site up and running, configuring your sites, deploying clients, that's in the first node here. And then under that, computer management is where we have all the daily tasks you'll do: distribute software, distribute updates. In the center section here, you'll notice a new kind of home page. Many of the feature areas throughout the product have this home page. You can link around. There's navigation down below here. You can jump right to different areas of the UI, web reports, and more information. Finally, on the right, we have an action pane. I'll show you how that works. It's context sensitive, so whatever you're doing, you'll see new actions here that you can do. You can advertise a SAS sequence to a collection here right simply from the right. Desired configuration management, here's the home page. All these home pages are dynamic, so if you want to get a quick view of what your compliance is on many of these baselines. So you can just multi-select there and the graph will change. There's enhanced search throughout the product. So let's say I was looking for a security right for task sequences. Just type in task sequences here and hit find now. And did I spell something wrong? So there they are. And if you want to create search folders now, how many of you are familiar with Outlook search folders or use those? Okay, so several of you are familiar with that. Same concept here. I'll just say new, create a search folder. This one I want to look for by name. I want to look for Exchange in the name. And just call it Exchange. So there it is. It does a search, and you just see the configuration items with the word Exchange in it. That will replicate down the hierarchy, so you can use that as an administrative point down throughout the product. Another feature, if you want to organize your packages, you could go in here and you could create a new folder. We'll call this one SAP. And just grab the SAP ones and you can drop them in there. And there you go, that'll replicate down the hierarchy. So this is just some basic tasks to help the administrator get through their daily life much quicker and simpler. So all of you are probably familiar with the roles we had before this in SMS 2003. With Configuration Manager 2007, we've added several new roles. And in this picture, it looks like you have to buy a bunch of new hardware. There's 5 new servers. It's not necessarily true. We're just trying to show a picture at scale. You could go separate servers. On our VM here, we have all these roles on one server. Some of the new roles. The state migration point up front there, that's used in the OS deployment feature. The Pixie service point is also used in the OS deployment server, and that's just built on top of WDS. So if people are familiar with RIS or WDS, we just have an option in there. It'll be right at the top. You can build a server from bare metal. Software update point. How many people are familiar with WSUS? If you have a WSUS infrastructure in your environment, we've just integrated that right into Configuration Manager, so it gives you the opportunity to pull down all content, not just updates, right into Config Manager and deploy it throughout your enterprise. Fallback status point. This is really around the internet-based client management feature. If a client is on the internet and it can't actually connect to its management point, this is an area it can go for help. You can get reports on that and bring those clients back in. And finally, the Systems Health Validator is a role that we've implemented based on Windows Server 2008 Network Access Protection feature. That's basically the NAP feature. And finally, the branch distribution point. You can run this on a workstation. You don't have to deploy a Windows server to be a distribution point. Based on licensing, 10 clients can connect at a time, and this would be in your branch offices. We also went for big performance improvements. This is faster than SMS 2003, quite frankly. We've multi-threaded several processes. We've changed how SUM works, not using hardware inventory, it's using state messages. And we've even improved backups considerably with the VSS technology we've added. Backups used to take hours, and now they'll take minutes. They're very fast. Later this morning, right down the hall, Wally's going to go into much greater detail on all this. Be sure to attend that session. It's in room 115. This just gives you an idea of some of the scale numbers. We do have customers well over 200,000, not in a central site and multiple sites, but we support up to 200,000 nodes in one central hierarchy. Each primary site within that hierarchy, one server can support 100,000 nodes. The fallback status point has the same number. and management points at 25,000. Distribution points and state migration points are really limited by how much disk I/O and the performance of that server. If you have big, several gig operating systems that you're having hundreds of people pull down, the performance will be limited by that, not really by the number of packages. Wally also will go into this later today and talk more about deploying clients. He'll touch in greater detail into several of these numbers. Platform support. So we support all the platforms you see here: Vista, Vista SP1, XP, SP2, Windows 2000, Windows Server 2008 will be picked up with our SP1, as I mentioned earlier, Windows Server 2003, 2000, several flavors of XP embedded, and Windows CE. And you can see that across the product, we support all the features on those with a few exceptions. Go ahead and turn it over here to Jeff.
Great. Thanks, Brian. So one of the biggest features in this product is around operating system deployments. And we had the abilities in SMS 2003 with something called the OS Deployment Feature Pack to treat an application, or sorry, an operating system deployment situation very much so like a software distribution situation. That was a feature pack that you downloaded to SMS 03. And then we refreshed that about a year ago now for Vista support. Well, this is the biggest feature by investment standards, or by investment numbers as far as resource and money and development. And in this product alone, in Configuration Manager, we've actually invested more in the OS deployment feature than the entire SMS 03 product. So we were really taking OS deployment quite seriously, and I think when you see some of the things we've done, we are really going to help you start to drive down the costs of your OS deployment environments and help you streamline some of those processes. And we have a couple of big things that do that we're going to show you here in a minute. So one of the things we've done to improve the OS deployment scenarios is actually improve or increase the breadth of support for different types of deployment scenarios. We've improved things like the ability now to give you a fully in-the-box capability to deploy offline. So we can now give you the ability to build off of a DVD or a USB boot device. So you now have that ability to, when you're giving your, perhaps if you guys are network administrators and or even partners building deployment offerings, you can now, when you give those laptops out, when you're deploying them, you can give them those recovery-style DVDs that some of our OEMs have been doing for a while. We've actually had some classic deployment scenarios around for a long time that if any of you have been working around the client deployment space, going back to the NT4 kind of unattend.txt situations, we've still got those classic kind of bare metal situations we have to go through where the box is coming in from a hardware supplier, or you're just flat out rebuilding a box for either a client or server, maybe perhaps being redeployed as a new role. So we support that new machine, and that can be done from a collection of ways, primarily things like that network boot scenario where Brian alluded to our building on top of WDS. So we integrate with WDS for our Pixie support, and that's the software update, or sorry, the Pixie service point role. We've moved away from RIS. We don't support the RIS environments now, so if you're sitting at the RIS environments today using that scripted build connection, we are now moved towards WDS to support the Windows image formats that have come from the Windows platform. We still support that wipe and load concept where we have a box we're targeting, and we're looking at a box, and we may or may not choose to migrate some data from that machine. And for those situations where we do that migration from machine to machine, we are incorporating the version of USMT3.0 that's been shipped out of the Windows division. So USMT3.0 is our tool we use there. It's kind of a bookend process. We would, in the beginning of the process, we would look down at the box. We would look at some of the technology we want to pull across, maybe application data, maybe user profile data. And then we would go through our process in a secure fashion and then bring that back down at the end. So we support that wipe and load process, either to a new machine or down to the existing box. We still support scripted upgrades. So if you have interests in still deploying versions of Windows like Windows XP or Windows Server 2003, we have the ability to fire that setup.exe with the upgrade process. So although things like scripted upgrades that are in place on top of an existing operating system are not necessarily the best practice for doing OS deployments, and primarily that is because you don't get to a known state. We don't necessarily have abilities to know how healthy that machine was beforehand, so we don't necessarily recommend doing those upgrades in place. However, if you do want to do that process, we do support it, so we have that ability inside the box. I mentioned the offline. I think that's a really important one to highlight. It's the abilities now to build that DVD environment now, and for those locations that are perhaps, especially here in the Europe region, bandwidth constrained. You know, you have some branch locations, or you have some places that have very small pipes, or even offline scenarios. Or if you're just dealing with mobile workforce, where they're trying to deploy into places where you don't see these guys very often. You know, they're sales folks, or even guys like yourself traveling here this week. If you had to do a recovery, you maybe not necessarily have that ability today until you've seen some of this capability in front of you. For the Pixie boot environment, we build on top of that WDS, so we've incorporated that F12, kind of hit the F12 key and build off of that, and we replicate that around the network. So we're using WDS for that scenario. So we thought it was important to compare with you the SMS 2003 feature capabilities. And down on the right side there, we just want to highlight a couple of things for you that are fairly different from SMS 2003. Obviously, one of the very big ones for us is that shift from RIS to WDS for Pixie connections. We actually incorporated in the past some zero-touch capabilities using the Business Desktop Deployment Solution Accelerator. And BDD has had its own life cycle. It's now being revved as well. You may have seen in some of the keynote demos yesterday, we were using the new version of that called Microsoft Deployment, which is now focusing on things like server abilities. And we used to use that for things like the BDD scripting technology to advance things like computer naming and migration of data across machines. Well, we still have that ability, but we've improved it now. And a lot of the things that you saw in BDD 2.2.5 and SMS 2003 in the OS Deployment Feature Pack have been built right in the product now. So as you install it, that OS capability is right there for you. We've now incorporated the support for Vista, so that was out of the box a very important thing for us. And I think it's important to highlight for you how closely we have worked with the Windows division. We have built right on top of that automated installation kit, and WinPE is included inside the product now. We've had a very close relationship with the Windows division, and Brian being the kind of the lead of all the program group guys, have been very involved over the last few years developing in conjunction with the Windows team all of that Windows technology for deployment. So Windows image technology and that versions of WinPE you're seeing going through those versions has been a very good relationship for us. So we really built on top of that. When you get into things like, we have two main features inside the OS deployment section that are really important to highlight, and we're going to cover those in a second. But when you see inside of our task sequencer, and I'm going to show you that for you in a second here, we have exposed a lot of the unattend.xml technology that we've been using in the past as far as an answer file. So we're giving you a nice, easy-to-use administrative experience by exposing all that in a user interface. We now support servers, a very important one for those customers who are thinking about doing server deployments. In the past, this was something you could technically do, but it wasn't necessarily a supported situation. So we now have abilities to support the server deployment scenarios. And with Windows Server 2008 picking up the technology that Windows Vista has been released as, the Windows image technology, we have now got really great capabilities for you out there who are doing client deployments to also pick up server deployments. So helping you guys utilize a similar skill set. Device driver management is the second major feature besides the task sequencer that's important to highlight. We have separated the challenge of administering drivers from those core images. So we're really trying to emphasize that you actually use the actual Windows image files that are shipped with the product and keep those as slim as possible and administer your drivers separately from there. And to do that, we have something called the driver catalog that allows you to import your drivers and associate tags to those with metadata. And then query those along the way, and it really helps you separate that several hundred megabytes of drivers that you had in the past to worry about in an image. Oh, incidentally, I should mention there for you, Michael Kelly, the lead PM for OS deployment, is going to be doing a great session this week on a very deep level of detail on that.
I just wanted to add one point on the state migration point. We actually went very deep on securing that. It's actually secured down to a machine, so only that machine that put the state up there has access to get the state. So it's locked down. It's not like the past where you just had an open file share where everybody's state was stored in the data center somewhere. We've actually secured that. It's a very secure solution. OSD is a premier solution for deploying Vista.
So one of the things we've mentioned about how we do this is this thing called the task sequencer, and it's important to highlight for you just exactly what the task sequencer does. So think of the task sequencer as kind of the process manager. The task sequencer is a executable. It's a service we run, and we deploy that against a collection. We advertise it, so to speak. And that task sequencer takes us through the process of perhaps booting to PE or initially starting on a machine we're targeting with grabbing the user state information. And then it takes us through a collection of steps, and we'll show you those in a second, what they look like. But the concept here is that we walk through a process, and we have abilities through that to provide reporting. So across the process, we have these steps inside the task sequencer that allow us to control little activities inside the process. And then we report back the status of those steps being achieved or not. And then along that way, we can also have error control involved here. So we can actually say on a certain situation, that's actually a really important step to complete successfully. And if we can't complete that in this scenario, let's stop this process and report back that status.
How many people have a Word document that they use to build their golden image at their company? A few of you. You can actually automate that as well, the build of an image with the task sequencer, not just the deployment.
And Michael's going to go into all the scenarios that we can be doing there, so I would encourage you to see his session. So there are two types of task sequence steps we have inside the task sequencer. The first is something called a built-in action, and we have, I think, around 28 or 30 of these in there. And these are things as simple as run command line, or create a partition, or deploy a software package, select an operating system image. But there's no limit here really to what you're doing with these. So the other type of task sequence option we have is something called a custom action. And the custom action can be just about anything you are doing today that we can use. So think of things like your batch files you're running today, your scripts, your VBS files, your executables. If your OEM is providing you tools or utilities you want to deploy, we have great flexibility inside the task sequencer to actually use those as well. So these custom actions are really quite limitless in what we can do with them. And just to mention that the task sequencer is not just limited to things like an OS deployment. We could use the task sequencer, as Brian alluded to capture an image. So we could be building that golden image. Maybe it was an XP build we've had for a while. We could use the task sequencer to be pointed at that build and actually capture that as that Windows image for us. So part of the task sequence capabilities include capturing an image in for us to start utilizing inside Config Manager. Another thing the task sequencer can do that is a bit misleading today, because the task sequencer is located inside the OS deployment section of the product. So it's a bit misleading in that respect, but the task sequencer can also be used for things like complex application installations. So when you think about maybe some complex database applications, or things like an SAP or something like that, that sometimes have collections of applications that need to be installed in a certain order, sometimes with things like reboot management in there. We can do that here. We can control that process. So it can be very helpful that way. So I've mentioned this already about the error control and the features of the task sequence steps. We have the ability to assign a condition. That condition has an action. And then we have a continue on error flag. So the task sequence has a condition, which is a test, so to speak. That test would be, if this disk is less than 100 gigabytes, only create one partition, for example. Or if it's less than 100 gigabytes, do not continue, so to speak. So we have these kind of little steps happening within certain points of the steps in the task sequence that are actually verifying as we go along. The other major feature next to the task sequencer is something called the driver catalog. And the driver catalog is, I think, a pretty important feature to highlight for you. It's an area we've invested a lot of time in to allow you to separate the drivers actually from the image. And what we do is a few things here. First of all, we catalog these drivers. We bring them in and we treat them like little mini objects. And we can replicate those driver objects around the network. And then we can query those through our process of either deployment or building an image. And they can also be queried inside the task sequencer. There's a drivers node inside the task sequence, or inside the OS deployment section, and we manage the drivers there in various numbers of ways. You saw Brian create things like search folders. We can also create things like driver packages, and we can assign these driver packages out to our deployment scenarios. So if you have interests in organizing drivers by things like location, or hardware vendor, or role of deployment, laptop, desktop server, there's a lot of flexibility in how you want to manage the drivers. And because we're treating them like little metadata kind of based objects, you can do a lot of different things with them as far as querying them and doing that kind of association. Let's take a look at that. Okay. Hopefully you see that. Bit of a high res there, sir. I'm going to zoom in for you. So it's important, I think, to start at the home page and just kind of show you a couple of things inside OS Deployment's feature area. First of all, we have in that center, as Brian alluded to, that concept of the home page. The home page is something that's actually quite a powerful place for us to gain quick information about that capability. And what you can see here is a couple of OS Deployment advertisements that we have in status that are going through their process right now, and we have a multi-select support there. Let's take a look at the drivers. As I expand out, we have a whole collection of sections in here. Michael Kelly is going to spend a whole lot of time on that. He's got quite a collection of features to cover there for you. So let's just go down and take a look at the drivers. That's just going to build out for us. Now, the drivers here are organized in many different ways. I have the abilities to do things like search, so I can do things like do a quick search there for certain vendors, find now, exam, and those kinds of things. And then I can take that and right-click and do things like driver injection. So as far as things like, how do I get into WinPE? One of the challenges in the past was we had these boot environments that sometimes on the desktop side or laptop was a bit of a challenge, but when you start looking at servers, we have a lot of challenges with managing drivers and being able to see things like drive arrays and complex disk arrays and SCSI chains and things like that. Sometimes that's a real challenge, getting those drivers into WinPE. So let's just take a look at how we can maybe do one of those injections. We support off the UI here the ability to do right-click. So you have the ability here to do right-click selections and do some actions right off there. And one of the cool things about the driver catalog is we can actually inject a driver we have imported right into things like a boot image. So we can take our WinPE. Incidentally, I should mention that Config Manager is the first System Center product to ship on DVD. And the reason for that is because we ship you WinPE inside the media. And part of that is the ability, it's that similar to that boot.wim file you're seeing on the Vista media. And we can inject drivers into that boot.wim file. So as you go through your cycles of hardware refresh, or you have pieces of hardware coming in that you don't have all the drivers for in WinPE by default, we can inject those in. So let's just take a look at how that works. I'm just going to take one of my SCSI card drivers here, and I'm going to inject that into a boot image. And this brings up a small UI for me. This UI is giving me the ability to select the WinPE boot images I want to inject this driver into. So I'm just going to select one of them, and I'll select the x64 boot image there. And you can see I can select all, I can select one. I can also do this with multiple drivers because I've got multi-select support. And then I've also got the ability to update distribution points when finished. So this injection can also kick off a process of migrating this driver down through our different boot images. So my remote locations down maybe in Portugal or in Dublin or something have the ability to see this change reflected. So it's a pretty quick process, but if I just hit OK there, you'll see a little process happen down on the bottom, and that's going to complete for me. Now that might give me a quick error there if I actually have already put that driver in. But that process is going to complete there and put that driver inside the boot image for me. So let's go back. Is that me? That's you.
So software distribution, one of our longest running features. We even made improvements there in Configuration Manager 2007. We finally added the copy package wizard if you want to move packages from one distribution point to another. We've added maintenance windows, and you can actually do the branch distribution points I talked about earlier. Another big investment that really helps simplify and up your compliance on a lot of different tasks is wake on LAN. So if you're deploying updates to your entire enterprise, you can wake up those PCs, let them fall back asleep after you've done the updates. This really will up your compliance over time much more quickly. You can use it for software distribution as well. We have more efficient troubleshooting with package cache control. Binary delta replication is huge. Now that you're going to be shipping those OS images all over your organization, if you add that driver like Jeff did, we'll just binary delta that down to all the distribution points. You won't be replicating the entire image again. We've also added client branding. A lot of customers had asked for this, where the UI that pops up on the client workstations advertising software distribution or an update, it could say, your company's IT department. Here's the message we want to send you about this update and why it's important. Go ahead and install that. Make sure you attend tomorrow. Dave Randall's going to do a deep dive on software distribution, and there's even more changes than I list here. Let me jump in real quick, though, and I'll show you a maintenance window and just how simple that is to create. Just pop into the collections here, and my finance servers, I got a request from the finance department that we really avoid processing on fiscal month end. They don't want any processing going on. So I'm going to add a maintenance window here just by going into the action pane and modifying the collection settings. Right here you'll see the new tab, maintenance windows. And we can just create a new one right here. I want this to happen in the middle of the month, so I'm going to call this maintenance window mid-month. I want it to occur from 1 to 4 a.m. local time, and that's going to be monthly. I'll make that the second Friday. We'll do it Saturday, 1 to 4. So right after Friday business is done, Saturday morning, 1 to 4 a.m., we'll go ahead and process that. And I hit OK. You can see it's added the maintenance window there. Hit OK again. And anything advertised to that collection now will be restricted to that time period. And you won't have change going outside of change windows.
I think this is a really important feature to highlight, giving you that ability to control when change happens in your environments. And this is kind of specifically designed for that data center application where you've got a collection of servers that, things like web servers or exchange boxes that have, high points of activity, low points of activity. And we're really giving you that ability to control when change happens in there. So we're going to queue things up. We've got reporting status through that. So if things don't complete in that maintenance window, we're going to come back and prioritize those at the next window. We've got all kinds of customers who are using a series of these for things like Windows updates and patch management and things like reboot management on especially things like servers. But it can also be employed for the desktops. That's me. Okay, so continuing on with our our topic here of software distribution. We have, in the past, you may have heard of a product called Softricity that we acquired. And that gave us the ability to create what was called application virtualization. We had in the past, through that acquisition, something called the SMS connector. And the SMS connector for SoftGrid was an ability for us to extend SMS console, SMS03, to actually, in our software distribution scenarios, go and poll a SoftGrid streaming server to give us a list of the available sequenced applications. And a sequenced application is essentially a kind of a packaged application that is in the form of an SFT file. And you deploy that virtual application down, and there's some SoftGrid sessions here this week for you to go and attend. Well, that SMS connector was actually pulled back. It was through some testing and scalability issues, we had to put a refresh on it. So in the interim, we've released something called the MSI utility for application virtualization. This is available today, and what this does is it gives you the ability to take your investments you made in things like the application sequencing efforts around packaging apps into virtual, and it gives you the ability to wrap those up inside an MSI file. And then you can take that MSI file and apply that to just what exactly Brian was showing you around software distribution, and just treat that virtual application and deploy it as an MSI file. And now that brings us all kinds of new benefits for software distribution, binary delta replication, maintenance window applications, and all that stuff that we've been showing you in CM already. But we're treating those in the same way we're treating some regular application distribution scenarios. So the MSI utility is available today. It's supported across all of our products, so as you go towards things like laptops and desktops and servers, it is available for you to be using there. It also incorporates asset discovery, and as we go forward, we actually have plans for a more enhanced SoftGrid integration in R2. So next summer, you're going to be seeing the abilities inside Config Manager to actually manage those virtual applications completely. And we'll treat those just like a replication status, and we'll push those application objects out, and they'll be virtual as opposed to full installations. So the MSI utility available today, we wanted to put it in just to show you what we're doing as far as supporting you today for your sequenced applications. And this is something you could be downloading today and be using for your virtual apps inside CM. Software updates. How many of you are using WSUS? Great, okay. Well, we had a couple of tools in the past that allowed us to automate things like software update processes. We've actually incorporated software update management right inside Config Manager out of the box. And we're building on top of WSUS 3.0. And what it does is it gives us the ability to do a state comparison of a machine, kind of what do you have versus what do you need. And it gives us an ability to manage your clients and your network, your servers or desktops, in much the same way that we would be managing them from a DCM perspective that Brian will show you in a minute. We're building on top of WSUS 3.0. So WSUS is sitting underneath our architecture and doing the synchronization up to Windows Update for us. So as that Microsoft Update service is coming in and that catalog is being synchronized, which is completely customizable for languages and products and things, we have the ability to then import those into our site database and use those as little applications. So we can push those out based on what kind of things you want to be doing as far as clients and application management. So we've also improved the support for non-Microsoft updates. So if you have things like third-party updates in the space of maybe your Adobes or your Citrix and those types of applications that actually release updates in the form of an update. And what we mean by that is sometimes applications are just kind of re-released, but if you've seen Adobe Reader, for example, that comes down as an update. Well, we can actually bring those in and use those updates similar to how we're doing software updates for Windows. So we're treating them in the same way. We also support line of business application updates. So if you guys are sitting out there and doing applications and you're writing those application updates in the form of an update, we can bring those in as well. Software updates is incorporated all across the product, and there's a whole bunch of places that software update is available to you to be using or reporting on or enforcing. The first and one of the most important is around OS deployment. We have abilities using our task sequencer to actually chain software updates right into the process. So as we push an image down to a piece of hardware, we actually have the abilities to chain the updates inside that process before it comes on the wire. So as the OS deployment is processed, before the user actually gets their login experience, we can enforce those updates and make sure that they're patched before they have a chance to be on the box and using it. How many of you would also like to patch across the internet? There's more than that out there. We've incorporated internet-based client management, and we have abilities now to do software update management across the internet. With a feature called internet-based client management, we now can do software updates to people like yourself sitting here. So you could be traveling and being on the road quite a bit, and we can now push those updates across the internet connections you experience and hotels and airports and things like that. So one of the big features about improving our security was also improving the breadth of support for where we could actually get to your machines and do management. So we'll touch on internet-based in a second here, but a very important place where we do software updates. Another significant area is our incorporation of software update processes into network access protection. And as you see the concepts of Windows Server 2008 becoming more visible to you, and as we head towards that launch, we have already incorporated network access protection support into Configuration Manager. So what that means is we can do things like a health validation of a box, and if it's missing a certain amount of software update, we can actually stop that machine from getting full access to the network until it's got its collection of patches. That's a very important thing to consider when you're talking about managing security updates and compliancy. The System Center Update Publisher is a tool you can add on to Config Manager. That is our tool that we use to support the third-party update catalogs, so the Citrix of the world, the Adobes I mentioned. The System Center Update Publisher allows us to take those updates, package them up, and bring them in. Now, one of the other areas that's really important is also the Desired Configuration Management section. Brian's going to touch that in a second, but we can actually monitor a baseline, and within that baseline, we can also be looking for the update status of your machine. So you can actually be sitting there with an Exchange box, and it's got some software updates on it, and we can actually say, if you're missing these certain updates, we want to report back and tell us exactly which updates you're missing. So in DCM, we can also incorporate updates. Now, one of the important things to also talk about with software updates is we've incorporated some new capabilities for how you do software updates. For example, when you do software update publishing, you can actually push the software update out, enforce things like wake on LAN capabilities, so we have that feature now, as Brian mentioned, and you can wake the machines up and get those patches done. Now, in that same update publish, you can also say, let's do that wake on LAN capability, let's make this update available for this window, and if we hit a certain point in time, 2-4 weeks out from now, let's put a network access protection enforcement on that update. So we can actually say, if you don't have this update, we're going to try and get it to you for a couple of weeks. We're going to try and get you wake on LAN support in there, so you're not going to worry about having to see the machine on or off. But if you don't have it by a certain point, we're going to put network access enforcements on you. Very important point there as far as controlling access. So we've also incorporated the ability to do software updates to virtual machines. So how many here are actually managing or incorporating virtual environments into their infrastructures today? Well, one of the biggest challenges with those virtual machines is actually managing the patching of those virtual machines. And sometimes customers can even experience more than hundreds or even thousands of virtual machines. And it becomes a point of just how do we manage that library and what status are those machines sitting at? And so what we've done is we've been working with the System Center Virtual Machine team to actually create a solution accelerator to allow you to actually patch those virtual machines. So using Configuration Manager, software update management inside the product, using PowerShell, and then Virtual Machine Manager, we're going to give you the ability through scripted guidance and documentation and a bit of tools to actually give that process into your environments. So you'll be able to have your virtual machines patched exactly the same way you're patching your hardware, your physical machines. That's coming out next summer, mid-2008. Hopefully in the spring there we'll see some more access to it around MMS timeframe. But the concept there is around identifying a virtual machine, so just finding those in the first place, and then assessing if those virtual machines have our patches on them, patching them up, spinning them up, getting them turned on, doing that patch work, and then reporting back that status. So one of the really important things about patching virtual environments, especially large libraries, is actually giving you the ability to figure out which ones are patched and what patches are they missing. And so this solution accelerator will actually bring that capability to you.
We do have a white paper that's out now that you can use to do that before the solution accelerator comes out too.
Good point, Brian.
This is you, I think. Network access protection, we talked about earlier. Jeff mentioned it. It's a huge feature in Windows Server 2008. The industry has been waiting for years for this. This is all designed to prevent those zero-day exploits from coming out and just destroying your infrastructure. You can quickly assign a mandatory patch and put a NAP policy in place, and people actually won't enter your environment, infected and start infecting other machines. So, like I talked to, how it works is basically there's a statement of health generated through the SCCM client. It's sent up to a systems health validator, which is a role on Windows Server 2008. That looks at the statement of health and says, hey, the policy is that you need this new zero-day exploit patch. You're out of compliance. It'll quarantine the node, and the node at that point has access in a perimeter network to go in, let me just jump to the picture here, to go in and hit the system health validator or the distribution points, pull down the new policy from the management point and get all patched up, reboot, comes up, generates a new statement of health to the system health validator, which then says, hey, you're good to go now, you're patched, we'll go ahead and give you access. You can use this on VPN, wireless, 802.1x through IPsec, and the different scenarios you see there. This is going to be really powerful in Windows Server when it comes out next year. We expect to see a lot of people using this, and this just works out of the box with Configuration Manager 2007.
I think one of the really important things to just highlight about the network access protection support inside Config Manager is that you don't necessarily just have NAP on your perimeter. You know, what is your network perimeter? Is it the proxy side? Is it the DMZ? Is it the locations? Your perimeter is actually everybody in the network. You know, you have different challenges with how they access the network across laptops, wireless, you know, going into home working situations, remote working or branch. So NAP is something that's going to be available to you across your entire network. So we're seeing customers already investigating putting NAP enforcement inside their networks. So you actually have a quarantine environment inside the corporate network. There's one on the perimeter as well, so when they come in on VPN and RAS, they have that ability to do that verification. But inside the corporate network, we have all kinds of machines falling out of compliance there as well. So one of the really key things about this is that we're going to be able to put this process into play for inside corporate networks as well as on the perimeters.
Yeah, using DHCP or IPsec is typically how that'll be done. So we also made some updates to reporting. We've integrated in that application compatibility toolkit reports, so you can quickly run a report in your enterprise to see, you know, what systems can be upgraded to Vista right now. What systems in your enterprise meet the system requirements to upgrade to Vista? That's right in there. Asset intelligence, we've added even more reports from SMS 2003 SP3. We've improved the reports there on software category family usage reports. Jeff and Brad were mentioning yesterday the granularity in the task sequencer. Each step you see in there, you can report on each one of those steps. So if you deployed an operating system to 1,000 machines, you could see kind of where every machine is in that process and have kind of near real-time reporting to see how your deployment's going. Desired configuration management, that's a big part of that feature. Reporting to see all these baselines and configuration items that I'll talk about in a minute to show you how are they doing? How compliant is in your environment? How well is it optimized? And then vulnerability assessment. We have a configuration pack for that available for download.
I think one of the key things about the reporting is that it's gone to such a level from we had in SMS 03. How many of you have seen the Vista Upgrade Advisor, the tool you can download and take a look at the requirements your machines have, if they've met or not those requirements? We've actually incorporated that upgrade assessment right inside Config Manager. So you could employ those reports inside your organization to see who are the best candidates for a Vista upgrade right now. You know, what machines are meeting the specs, which machines are meeting the minimum requirements, who's missing on the video card requirements. So we've incorporated all those reports. I think the Vista upgrades are about 6 or 8 reports. But just to give you a quick understanding of who in your environment is capable of holding Vista on their hardware, and we're doing that for server as well, so you'll see that from the server side.
Good point, Joe. So some more information on the asset intelligence reports. You know, a lot of times you want to ask, when was it, you know, this application's out there, I have this package in my system for it. Is it being used? You know, when was the last time it was used? We've made it really easy. You used to just use metering before and you deploy that out, but now we have some kind of pre-made metering rules based on last usage inventory. You can quickly just take a look and you can see what what licenses are being used in your company. You can harvest them back, you can change the collections, and you can deploy it elsewhere rather than spending more money on software. We also have change summarization. So if you have a collection of like finance desktops and you want to see what changes are occurring there, you can actually build an asset change summarization report and see what's recently changed in your environment. We also added in the version that ships with Configuration Manager, a cool new feature called Client Access License Usage Tracking. We have it on 2 workloads right now, Windows Server and Exchange, but this will really help you with your licensing on the server. How many cows are being used on Exchange or Windows? And you can see if wow, I've got plenty of licenses left, or I need to buy more. And that was a much harder question in the past than with these reports. So that'll be really valuable.
I think it's really key to just tee off how important this AI feature is to people out there. We allow you to attach meaningful business terminology to technical versions of products. So in the past, you've seen an inventory report come back, you know, winword.exe version 90210. that really didn't give you a good indication except for the fact that it was Word. Well, now we can actually give you the abilities to understand the version of Word, the version of Office, the installation source, and how it was licensed. So you can actually see, in fact, that WinWord.exe version that we're seeing on those 20 machines in Lisbon is actually installed from our volume license media. 2 of them were, in fact, MSDN download installations, and in fact, 1 was a full package installation. Somebody bought a copy of Office XP. So it's going to give you this insight into how installations of applications are happening inside your organization. And then from that information, you can start to respond to installations of software and say, we want to prioritize those guys who are sitting on the MSDN versions, or we're actually really okay in our volume license agreement because we're way under our usage right now. We want to get those guys running up on those standard versions as well. So it's going to give you that deeper insight into what you're running out there than you could see today without AI in your environments.
Let me jump into desired configuration management. This is another big feature within Configuration Manager 2007. This allows you to define configuration items, as I mentioned before, in baselines, to identify required and prohibited configurations. You can remediate those by deploying software scripts and updates, and it even has a dashboard to provide status. You can define configurations however you want, by business, by workload, role, and to whatever granularity you want. And we also have a site up. How many people have heard of management packs for Operations Manager? So we have a site up for configuration packs for Configuration Manager, so you can download those right into the console and leverage all the ones that Microsoft is releasing and our partners are releasing. There's some basic terms and concepts within desired configuration management, and I mentioned these before. There's 4 types of configuration items: application, operating system, general, and software updates. And what's a configuration item? Is that just one setting in the registry? No. How we think of a configuration item in Configuration Manager is it's a group of settings for an application like SAP, or it's a group of settings within an XP operating system, or it's a group of software updates, several ones within the software update CI. Then you can take these base CIs and you can pull those into a baseline, and then that baseline you can define it as required, optional, or prohibited. So if let's say you have some peer-to-peer software that's restricted, you can actually say that's a prohibited CI and baseline in your organization, get reports on that, and then you can design remediations for that and deploy them. Jeffrey Sutherland actually tomorrow is going to go way in deep on desired configuration management, but I want to show you a little bit of a demo here, but I don't want to steal too much thunder from him. So this week we'll have 19 configuration packs up on the site, and there'll be over 60 by the end of the year. Let me quickly just show you what the site looks like. Well, let's see here. Where did it go?
So I'm actually calling this the dark horse of the product, and what I mean by that is it's going to sneak in on organizations, and I think you're going to find an immediate application of this to your environments. What Brian's saying here about defining a baseline, defining what a configuration of an OS should look like. So your Exchange box or your Vista box, what should the configuration look like? What updates should be in there? What applications should and shouldn't be there? What updates should be included? And then we can come back from that and get reports on what are we missing? What baselines are being missed from complete reporting success? And what items are we missing on? So this concept, this SML-based relationship of defining what a configuration should look like, and then we have this really deep level of reporting about who is missing what item and why. That can really lead us into determining who to manage more effectively, what locations are sitting behind more updates, et cetera. So it's going to give us the ability to have a deeper understanding of our configurations and our environments.
So here's the website that's up today. You'll see there's 7 out there now. You'll see more going up as the week progresses. You simply just go in here, you can read about it, download it, and then import it into desired configuration management. And this is kind of the first step in our DSI vision we've been talking about for years. This is models defining relationships between systems, and we'll be able to, as the years progress, kind of do artificial intelligence type of things. So you want to get on DCM and start modeling out your environment and see how compliant it is and get standardized and optimized. But go ahead and look out here. This is in the resource section of the deck, the link to this site. So go ahead and check it out.
One of the important things here is this isn't just product information about configurations. This is also giving us the ability to define things like regulatory baselines. So, for example, here in the Europe region, the European Union Privacy Directive, something that perhaps some of you are experiencing requirements to report on. Well, we actually have, through our relationship with a partner called Radeon, an ability to download some configuration packs for different regulatory bodies. So in the North American region, there's some larger ones like Sarbanes-Oxley. If any of you are with American organizations, you might see that coming through. HIPAA, a US health regulatory body. But we have, in the past, for example, with Exchange, not even had an ability to understand the 4,000 technical controls that are required for SOX compliancy. Well, this is going to give us an ability to say, of that regulatory compliancy requirement, what am I missing? You know, I don't want to worry about the 95% I've got. I want to worry about the 5% I'm actually missing. So these configuration packs are going to be able to be pulled into your environments, applied against your machines, and then report back what you need to worry about.
Good point. All right, let me jump right into a demo here. You got the desired configuration homepage here, and as we've showed you before, it's all dynamic. You can see the status of those baselines that you've deployed out to the systems. I'm going to go ahead and create a new configuration baseline here. We have some there imported as well. So this one I'm going to call, Jeff was mentioning Exchange. You know, I've had a problem in my environment where I want to make sure people have Exchange SP2 deployed, and I want to report on, you know, is that disappearing or people uninstalling that from our Exchange servers? So go in, this is just kind of like the rules wizard in Outlook. Go in here and say, you know, all versions of server, put that in there, and what are the software updates? We'll go under service packs here and search for Exchange. And there's these are all SP2, I believe. Make sure. Okay.
Yeah, service pack 2.
So service pack 2. I'll assign those to the baseline. Click next. Just validates everything. It's going to create the baseline. Successful. And close it. Now I can advertise that baseline out to my Exchange collection and get reports on is SP2 disappearing, which ones don't have it, and I can define collections based on non-compliance to that required baseline. And then have the software, you know, software updates or software distribution push that out. I showed you the web page before. We've actually pulled some of the controls that will be going up this week in here. One that applies in Europe, as Jeff mentioned, is UPD. So we'll go into this one, and we'll assign this to a collection. It's just simple. Once you've pulled this down, you can look at it. This one just has one application configuration item, but we could drill into the detail there on that. But I won't do that now for time. But this I'll advertise out to my SQL. I'll do SQL 2005 in this case. I'm going to advertise this out to the finance servers and make sure that they're meeting the UPD requirements. So I'm going to assign this to a collection. I just browse for that collection. Like I mentioned, I'm going to do finance servers, and I have a sub-collection here for the EU. Go ahead and choose that one. And there's no sub-collections, but just in case there were. This we're going to do, we're going to check for this every 7 days. And it's just that quick. Now I've assigned a baseline to collection. That'll run, and I can look at the reports and see how I'm doing with the privacy directives in the EU.
Just jump back to the reports on the home page and show them how they can see that. We've got abilities to really define explicit reporting on what he's just assigned here. So as Brian's fired that out there, in the center we can be looking at configurations in the bottom there, compliance by baseline, by collection, by computer. So we could very quickly on the bottom here go through a compliance collection, or compliance by collection, and see on that Exchange European Union collection who's missing, who's hitting it, you know, are we okay? And then I can only prioritize the 3 boxes I need to worry about. Okay, so we've alluded to the abilities to manage outside the corporate network, and in the past it's been a real challenge to actually do anything outside the corporate boundaries. Well, I think one thing I've learned by sitting in the System Center product group now is that the group has taken some of these things very seriously, and with security as the utmost priority, we're now really pleased to be able to say that we can do this across the web. So we now have abilities to manage across the internet for things like software distribution, software updates, some inventory services. Some things aren't realistic across the internet, like OS deployments, but you know, we have abilities now to do a lot of things we couldn't do in the past. And when you talk about the environments you're managing today, it's becoming more and more mobile. You know, we have all kinds of customers telling us that they are now buying, you know, a skewed percentage of their machines in the mobile environments than they are in desktops. And so those mean that, that means to us is that they go on and off the grid a lot more than they used to. So the ability now to manage outside the corporate network is an extremely powerful tool. So a big feature inside CM. Now, those things like road warriors, those guys who are traveling, people like yourselves here, are a classic scenario, but this goes well beyond that. We have some customers we've been working with in our TAP programs who are using things like point of sale or retail restaurant locations where they've got environments where they have machines sitting in a restaurant. There's a kiosk, there's a cashier device, and they can now just have a web connection from that restaurant and manage that completely for what they need to do with it. One of the things I mentioned here was how important security was, and we had to be really careful about putting things on the outside of our network, and we had to make sure we did that securely. So, I've sat in some of the meetings and listened to some of these guys talk about this, but it was a really big point about doing this. We had to make sure we did it in a trusted fashion, so the machines we're managing out there, we know who they are, and the machines out there that are being managed by us, they know who's managing them. So that's a certificate relationship, PKI is being used, and we're doing that on the public side. So when you start talking about internet-based client management and things like network access protection, people are looking at NAP and saying to us, well, actually, that's going to cause me a lot of problems because I've got machines out there that are traveling a lot, and they're going to come in and hit my NAP enforcements, and they're not going to get through. Well, internet-based client management is going to take you to that point where even those machines that are off the grid for a long time, they're actually going to get patched. They're going to get their updates pushed to them in a regular fashion, just like the desktops and other machines that are sitting inside your corporate boundaries. So internet-based management for us was a significant advancement, and we've done it in a secure fashion. So it can be a trusted service you can provide to your end users.
Yeah, you don't want to be sitting in quarantine for an hour, so this will be great integrated.
People won't accept it. Yeah, like if you start looking at NAP and say, I don't even know why I can't get on the network, but my Outlook isn't connecting. Well, we want to make sure that experience is minimized, and enforcing things like NAP in an environment has to be done with that end user experience in mind. So this is really going to take us to that point, we think. So with respect to that, what about devices? We've had some discussions in the past about device management. We had an add-on to SMS03. Well, within Config Manager, we now have the abilities to do device management. And we support the Windows-based devices, things like CE, Pocket PC, Windows Mobile, or smartphone. You may have heard that terminology used. And the features we support for device management are things like hardware-software inventory, file collection information, software distribution, and some settings management. So you have the abilities to actually do some of those works, some work on those machines through either a docked or a wireless connection. We have internet-based client management capabilities, so if some of those devices are using their wireless connections, we have abilities to be using them across the web as well. Some of that is based on some of our network carriers out there helping us, but that is something we're trying to achieve here. So the concepts that those devices are even more regularly on and off the corporate network, in most cases usually more off the network now than on, but we have abilities here to incorporate that service as well. There we go. Okay, so there's another technology coming along, and you might have heard of a product code named Yona, which was actually been branded officially as System Center Mobile Device Manager. This is a technology that's coming along here in the next year, and in parallel to the Configuration Manager technology around device management, System Center Mobile Device Manager is a comparative technology that supports a couple of different platforms. So when you look at things like the levels of Windows CE we support, and Pocket PC and smartphone, we're actually looking towards the mobile device management technology moving forward to really expand and support a broader range of mobile device platforms. And there's a couple of sessions, I know there's one this week on Friday about the MDM technology, and we'd encourage you to go check that out. Okay, so we wanted to put in a bit of information for you about just exactly what other technologies are floating around Config Manager. And we mentioned a couple of them like the MSI utility, but we've had a lot of questions about the SDK, and the SDK is something that you can be using to extend the features of the product. And the SDK gives you the ability to automate functionality or add features or create new features that aren't already in the box by default. The SDK is on the way. It'll be available in the early part of the calendar 08 year, so the late January, early February timeframe. It's in beta right now if you're interested. And down the right side there, you see the actual list of areas of Configuration Manager that you'll be able to apply the SDK against. And we're going to provide you code samples, documentation, guidance, etc. about how you could be doing some of these things. If you were in the Bob Kelly keynote yesterday, the great big session, where you saw Bill Anderson do a demonstration, you might have seen the Microsoft deployment capabilities there, where he was showing you how to configure server roles. Well, the B2D group is actually the ones that have built that MDT toolkit, or MD toolkit, Microsoft Deployment Toolkit. And that's actually an example of the SDK. So the next version of BDD has transformed itself a little bit. It is now based entirely on the SDK. So as a good example for you, you'll be able to take a look at that as a download today. It's in RC1 status. And you'll be able to look at what they've done inside there as far as extending the OS deployment feature set. So they've taken in there the abilities to incorporate all of the Windows Server 2008 Server Manager configuration sets, the 28 server roles you can configure a server for. And they've given you that ability right inside that task sequencer. So you can configure Active Directory, DNS, DHCP, different features and functionality like IIS, Hyper-V, etc. So you'll have the ability to actually configure those in an automated way. Just one example for you about how we can extend with the SDK. So how about the toolkit? Well, how many of you here have been using the toolkit in the past? The SMS toolkit. Things like Trace32 and those kinds of tools, incredibly powerful tools. Things that aren't necessarily part of the core product, but really do ease that administration experience and give you some features that allow you to really start looking at log files and things like that in a very intuitive way. Well, we have the toolkit being released. It is coming out, in fact, the end of this week, and I think it's being published on Friday or Monday of this week. So you'll be able to download that toolkit, and it'll be available for you that way. There's 6 tools in that toolkit and 1 template, and we have plans for additional tools to be released to web in the near future as well. So we're working on how we can get those incorporated. The core admin tools, Trace32, Policy Spy, Client Spy, those aren't necessarily new to some of you guys. You've probably been using some of those for quite a while, but hopefully you'll have abilities to use those in CM very quickly here in the near future. We've also given you in the toolkit something around DCM. So there was a bit of an add-on to SMS03 that was called Desired Configuration Management, and that DCM feature was actually quite different than the one that Brian just talked about here in this session. And one of the things that customers have asked us for is the ability to actually take some of their DCM knowledge and investment they made and bring that forward into Configuration Manager. So you're seeing some conversion tools there for the digests you may have created in the past, and some of that will be also included in the toolkit. What about knowledge? What about the product knowledge and information? So we have spent a lot of time in the last maybe 6 to 12 months as the product was really polished and prepared for release. We have been really concerned and conscious of making sure that you knew just exactly what was new in the product and what features were different and how things may have changed. So a lot of stuff is being released to web. If you look at our Microsoft.com location, you'll see white papers and data sheets, and down at the pod in the convention floor there, we have some information there as well. We're also releasing a Microsoft official curriculum course. The MOC, the official course, will be a 5-day course. It'll be based on 2 days of SMS03 upgrade, 2 days of a greenfield installation, and then 1 day of daily administration techniques. So that 5-day MOC course is going to be coming out in the February timeframe and is actually in beta right now. So if you're interested in that, come and talk to us and we can help you get access to some of that knowledge. Some of the really cool things that are worth highlighting, the TechNet Virtual Labs. The TechNet Virtual Labs are an online experience that allows you to go through the product in a somewhat scripted way in a hands-on lab format. And I'll tell you, the virtual machines running in there are pretty darn impressive. The specs those things are sitting on, I don't know what they're running on, but it is incredibly fast. So if you're interested in learning a bit more about the product, the virtual labs have the ability to in a really rich experience, go through the product and see some labs up there. We are going to be improving that process. It's merely a matter of getting our labs published into that process. But I think there's a couple up there right now for 03 and Config Manager. And we're going to be increasing that library here in the future as well. So in the next 6 months, hopefully you'll see a collection of additional labs we put up there. We have a 120-day eval available. If you go to our Microsoft.com System Center website, you'll see links to pull down that 120-day eval. We also have some available down here at the pod, so if you're interested in that, you can get that. But there's something that's probably a bit cooler than that, actually. Instead of actually installing your own installation, building up a virtual machine or a server on a piece of hardware, there's something else called the VHD program. And the VHD program, if you just go to Microsoft.com/VHD, you'll see a whole collection of products, and we've just added Config Manager up there. And it's a downloadable virtual machine that you can pull down. We put that together about 2 or 3 weeks ago after RTM code was available to us. And that's a 500-day time-bound virtual machine. So you can actually pull down that virtual machine, and for 500 days, use it, test it. It's a full production box. There's no limitations on it, etc. So there's a small end-user license agreement you go through just about usability, but essentially that's an experience for you that's already built and configured, and it's actually had the Wally stamp of approval on it. So Wally actually verified it was built properly. He fixed a few things I didn't do right in it. But anyways, great download for you, and it'll get you great experience on the version of CM. White papers, a whole collection of white papers. If you're interested in things like OS deployment or desire configuration management or asset intelligence, those are up there for download. A lot of data sheets if you want quick summaries, those are available too for you, so you can get some of that summary information. And just to summarize for you, it's important to understand that we think of this product in three ways. And this is kind of the marketing pitch, but the concept here of reducing the cost to deploy and update your operating systems is a really big feature here. We're trying to focus on automating and simplifying the process of OS deployments and then updating those deployments. We want to give you enhanced insight and control over your environments, and that's things like DCM, Desire Configuration Management, the asset intelligence, the reporting features, and hopefully Configuration Manager will bring you the abilities to have better understandings of what you're managing, what you need to manage more effectively, and what you don't need to worry about. And then optimize for Windows. Building on top of that Windows platform was a huge focus of this release of the product, and tying our close connections into the Windows Vista team and the Windows Server team. And these guys are meeting with us constantly back in Redmond about how we can be working together. And when you see things like network access protection and our OS deployment feature set, those are clear examples of how tightly we've been working with those guys. So a couple of resources for you. The product pages obviously are some of the kind of why information, what is the product looking like and why is it, kind of the business value information. The TechNet technical library, we didn't actually mention this in the session, but we've actually replicated all the help information from the product right up onto TechNet. So there's a full documentation library of the product's information up there on TechNet for you. The Tech Center, the TechNet Tech Center, that's kind of a portal. The TechNet Tech Center is where you can find all the information around things like the webcast and the audio casts, and I've put the direct link there for you. But the Tech Center is kind of a summary location for you of where things like white papers are available and all the webcast libraries. The config packs, we've put that link up for you. We're really excited to see that come live. That's been something we've been working on for a while. But those config packs, those CAB files, they're actually CAB file format, are now available for download. So that's just come up this week, and as we launch our product, it's really great to have that available for you today at ship date. So the config pack download link is there for you as well. One of the key topics, or one of the key things we wanted to do for you today in this session was actually point out to you where you can go and get more information about the product. And this was a high-level overview. We hope it was valuable to you, but we also wanted to point out to you some other sessions this week that really go deep. And you've got some guys here this week from Redmond that are extremely experienced in this product. They've been working on it. Some of these guys like Wally, he's like the oldest guy in the whole company, I think, as far as experience. This guy's been on System Center or SMS for what, 15 years or 12 years?
Most tenured. He meant tenured. He's not actually the oldest.
Not physically the oldest, but and some of these guys have seen this product come through the last 5, 6 versions. So they're here to talk to you this week about how we developed this product and why we made some decisions. And we really hope you get some valuable time with them and hear some of what they have to say. So there's a list for you of what they're going to be covering. So at that point, I think we're fairly on time. I want to thank you for coming. I hope you have a great week. On behalf of Brian and I, thank you very much for attending our session. We have some microphones if you have any questions, and we'll open it up at this point to Q&A. Thank you. Yes, please, go ahead.
Oh, thank you for your presentation. You showed us an example of driver injection.
Yep.
And I wonder if one can import the drivers using the INF sys configuration.
Are you using the INF files?
Yes.
Yeah, actually, we didn't have time to do the driver import, but what we actually do this is a great question about drivers. When you go to like the HP and Dell.com websites and download the R90210.exe file and expand it out for that Dell network card or whatever, you get a whole collection of files. You get INFs and DLLs and all that kind of stuff. When we go through the import, we're looking for a few of those, like the txt setup.oem file and some of the INF information. And we bring that in and we chain it in there. So that's actually packaged up inside the driver when we pull it in. So yeah, we are using some of that. Now, one of the important things about those drivers is more and more of those drivers now are more like applications. So some of those are actually requiring full installations as well. So when you look at things like servers, we have like management tool sets and utilities around some of the server drivers for load balancing and things like that. So some of those do also require things like installations of software distribution packages. However, we're going to get you the device category recognition to get things like boot environments connected to locations using network cards and disk drivers. we're going to get you through that process of getting the machine built. So the key point there was to get the driver management under wraps.
Can I add to that? Or ask another question,
Sure.
which is, if I had my sort of, using SysPrep, and I had my whole folder of drivers, would that scan the whole folder and then integrate it into the driver pack?
Yes, another great question. So if you have a collection of drivers, what you can actually do is, on the driver import wizard, you can actually point at a location. You can point at a share UNC path, and you can pull in everything you see there. So, you'd have perhaps a machine that's sitting on a network. And if you have a SysPrep machine, you might want to pull that directory onto a location somewhere. But we have the ability to scan a whole directory and find what's available in there to import. So yes, that is possible.
And you can apply categories to everything and organize it in that way.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I have a question about the desired configuration manager.
Yeah.
Is it possible, if one of your servers is not compliant, that you can put an action on it? So if you scan and you see one of my financial servers is not compliant, put it on hold, disconnect it, shut it down, or something like that? Or
Yeah.
perhaps apply a patch immediately without user interaction?
So what you can do, how you do that, it's kind of a two-step process right now, and in our future versions, we're going to have it just be enforceable right through DCM. But what you would do is you would have a dynamic collection that basically looks for compliance with that baseline, and you look for systems that are out of compliance, and then you advertise, you have a recurring advertisement to that collection that'll basically install those particular updates, and it'll always be running and seeing if they're in compliance, and that recurring advertisement will always be hitting those systems. And then if you have maintenance windows, it can happen within the maintenance window. That's how you.
So an example we give you there maybe is, the concept here is, well, I think what you're referring to, the program group refers to as desired set. So we have an environment, we want to make sure that's enforced. And that's not quite the reality today as far as automating all of that, but there's actually some good reasons why you wouldn't want to do that around change management and configuration management of your environments. What you can do is what's called query-based collections. So you can actually create a collection based on some properties around, what am I looking for? It's this configuration item, maybe my antivirus product. And then on the other section of that collection property, on the query, you would say, well, actually, I'm looking for that configuration or that configuration item, the antivirus product. And then I would look for that status report to be failed. So I would say in that query-based collection, only populate that with the machines in my environment that do not have that configuration item present, which could be like the antivirus product. And then on that collection, then I'm controlling those environments. So then I can say advertise to that collection. So today, and Jeffrey will go through this for you in more detail, but today it's really a query-based collection process in conjunction with things like software update being pushed alongside of it.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Hi, just a quick question, if I may. Something I didn't quite understand on the issue of the task sequencer. Is it possible to use that to facilitate a P2V operation by analyzing the configuration of a specific physical application server, so that you don't actually have to reinstall the application on a virtual environment? So you can just use the task sequencer to work out what, if you like, what particular actions would have to be taken to reinstall the application on a virtual server.
It depends on what kind of actions you're, I'll take a stab at this, I guess. It depends on what kind of actions you're looking for there. Is it, if you're looking for perhaps, if you're looking for some inventory services, task sequencer doesn't really fire inventory calls, but the task sequencer has no limit there. So if you could create some custom action steps inside of a task sequencer, for example, to maybe run some kind of a tool against a machine that, creates some kind of a query, maybe a WMI call or something like that. You could actually process those in a collection of steps, yes. You would have to have some kind of a support from some kind of a process or an application or something.
Yeah, well, I'm actually sort of cheating slightly here, because I mean, what we normally have to do is we create our virtual machine, and then we've actually got to reinstall the application from the customer, assuming they've still got that software to reinstall. The problem is, if that's not the case, then that opens a whole new can of worms. So what I'm wondering is, if we could use the task sequence to actually figure out, if you like, what component tasks had gone into building the original machine? Could we take just the select set of component tasks and reproduce them?
Yeah, that's a great question for Michael Kelly in his session. I do. You can do a PowerShell step, and I know Virtual Machine Manager is very PowerShell enabled, so it's quite likely that you could accomplish what you're looking for there.
Thank you.
Any more questions?
Yeah, just one more. I was wondering about high availability in the product. In 2003, it was quite hard to cluster, etc. And it wasn't really particularly highly available. Is there any advance on that in the new product?
Cluster support. So I just want to make sure I understand the question. Is the question, do we support clusters?
Yeah, what form of high redundancy is there and potentially in the product?
So from the perspective of managing the configuration of the machines in the clusters?
Just from the fact, can it be clustered at all, and what elements, of it can be made highly available?
Oh, can we cluster? Is that the question? Can we cluster configuration manager? I believe the answer there is no.
Well, we have SQL cluster support in Configuration Manager 2000.
But could you cluster the actual CM server?
Can you cluster some of the services within that, or particular server roles and things like that, which were quite difficult to...
Yeah, the server roles, I don't believe we support those in clusters, but we do have SQL support, SQL clustering support for the database.
Okay, cool.
Thanks.
All right, with that, we're out of time. Thank you, everybody.
Have a great week. Thanks very much.
Great week. Yeah. Oh, wait, one more question. Sorry. These lights are bright. I couldn't see you.
Regarding the patching of a group of servers, do you provide some way to patch servers that are acting in a kind of load balance features like DNS? We should not patch two DNS servers at the same time, or cluster host. We should not pass the two nodes of a cluster at the same time. So what are the best practice or the guideline for, let's say, DNS and cluster are quite basic, but we can have applications that have a really more complex way of patching it. So what are the process to patch this kind of group of servers where you have dependencies between the servers?
Yeah, we don't have support for that today. We're looking for. There's probably some ways you could be really creative, but we don't have support in the product for that.
I think one of the easy ways to think about that maybe would be maintenance windows. Potentially, maintenance windows could help by collections too.
But it's more complex than that. You have to bleed the connections up one and go to the other. So,
yeah, there's some. You'd be looking at dynamic collection creations, and we don't support that. So, thank you.
Thank you.